introduce the gentleman alongside me on the screen right now. We've got Madhav Sehgal, the General Manager of the Andaz New Delhi, live from the Indian School of Hospitality. But yes, of course, we're socially distant. We're in two different rooms at the moment. Madhav's going to be talking about leadership in a VUCA world. You've got 20 minutes, Madhav. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Sataj. So I'm going to start by sort of just share my screen here, make sure I've got that view correct. Yeah? So good evening, everyone, and greetings from the Indian School of Hospitality here at ISH, this beautiful facility. And I want to sort of begin by thanking Dilip and Manav for inviting me and having me over here today for this session and giving me the opportunity to speak with you and connect with all of you on our first ever virtual conference for hoteliers here in India. So we've got 20 minutes. I want to make the best of it. Our subject for today that we're discussing is leadership in a VUCA world. And some of you might have heard the term VUCA, some of you have not. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it really is and then sort of progress from there into how do we sort of manage and lead in times like these. Obvious top of mind for all of us is the fact that we've got this COVID and post-COVID sort of scenario around us, right? And you would have seen that the best of countries in the world have sort of been sort of scrambling first to sort of move towards finding masks. Then they've sort of moved towards, you know, finding ventilators. And then they've moved towards from there to sort of building hospitals, and ultimately everybody's in this mad search for a vaccine. And everybody has suffered, everybody's had a challenging time, yet some countries with some leaders have done better. And it's not because they were able to preempt, but it's more because they were probably better prepared. And the leadership was better prepared to deal with the VUCA situation, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world that we sort of live in, and which has been brought to life in this current COVID scenario. So I'm from Delhi. I was born here. I've grown up in and across this country, this beautiful, amazing land of ours, and I've been an avid biker, and I've sort of always felt, as I've been reading about VUCA and understanding about leadership of VUCA, that, you know, riding a motorcycle on Indian roads is very often just like being in a VUCA world. And on Indian roads, you know, there's a high level of volatility, high level of uncertainty. It's complex and it's ambiguous, right? And if you can survive that, you can do anything. So I've been doing that for the longest part of my life, and sort of some of the best memories that I have are from my motorcycle. But moving on from there, I want to begin by showing you a brief video. It's about 60 seconds long. It gives you a little bit of an insight on where this term VUCA comes from, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous acronym that's been put together by the American armed forces during and post a couple of the wars that they had in the 90s. So we'll take a quick look at this 60-second video. So you just saw the term itself was coined by the American forces during the early 90s, as they were coming out of the Cold War, 80s, coming out of the Cold War, and then subsequently dealing with a couple of the challenges in the Middle East. So let's look at briefly what has been the impact of this pandemic for you. So there's going to be a poll on the right-hand side of your screen that you're going to see. I'm going to invite all of you to sort of participate and share some of your feedback with me on that regarding this question. Now, in the pandemic, some of us are sort of feeling a little bit exhausted, tired. Some of us are feeling a bit slower. Some of us, like me, have put on a few kilos, and some of us are a bit bolder. But there are others who, on the contrary, are feeling younger. These guys are more energetic. Some of us are feeling a bit fitter, a little bit more secure, and more happy. Now, which one of these two options would you sort of say you relate with more? I'm going to invite you to sort of answer the poll that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll see the results. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, but just putting into perspective what the impact of something like this can be for us mentally and physically. This gentleman is a legend. He is Jack Welch, the former chairman and CEO of General Electric, one of the greatest leaders, businessmen that we've had in our times. And he has this beautiful, beautiful quote that I want to share with you, which puts into perspective why it's so important to be prepared for VUCA. And he says that when the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the end is near. So as a leader, if you are not able to keep pace with the changes which are happening around you, in your business, or in your team, or in the environment that you're working in, you know that that's a tough spot to be in. Similarly, for your company is not able to adapt and innovate and move forward as fast as what the market is moving at, you know that you're in a tough spot. The average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company has shrunk from about 65 years to just under 20 years. And I want to begin by sort of putting this in more perspective for you when you look at sort of how we have communicated over the years, right? About 100,000 years ago, we were sitting around a fire telling stories and developing our language. And that's how sort of the legacy of things and the tales sort of transferred from one generation on to the other. There's the art of storytelling. Then, about 30,000 years ago, we started painting and started sharing our knowledge through paint. 3,500 years ago, we started writing, and scrolls and texts and literature and all of this sort of came to life, and we were able to share knowledge and wisdom across a much larger set of generations by writing. And 30 years ago, lo and behold, you had PowerPoint, and it's taken over our lives. We know that, all of you know that. And the point that I want to make, it's amazing how we have sort of adapted over 100,000 to just 30 years ago and learned so quickly to adapt ourselves and our lives to technology. When you look at how are we sort of communicating today, we've got Zoom, we've got Teams, we've got Google Meet. And these technologies have been there for a few years, but in the last 3 months, we have had an exponentially fast learning curve. So we've adapted to this really fast. What that means for us, that we truly are gifted. We have the ability to learn. We have the ability to adapt at all ages, at all times of our lives. It's just a matter of training ourselves and practicing for it. So I want to share another quote with you. This gentleman, I don't know how many of you know this guy. This gentleman is Charles Darwin, and he brought to us the theory of evolution. And the point that I'm trying to make, that it's not the strongest leader or the strongest company. It's not the most intelligent leader or the most intelligent company as such that survives the VUCA world, that survives the time and the essence of change. It's the ones who are the most responsive to change. It's the leaders and the companies who are best prepared to deal with the volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world we are living in. So what is VUCA? Let's look at it in a little bit more detail. VUCA is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, as I've shared. It generates in us sort of hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. It makes us more intolerant, irritable, makes us less creative, makes us obviously more critical of things around us, and leaves you generally with bad decisions and an impaired memory. Sort of when you struggle through traffic, riding a nice motorcycle on Indian roads. In this world, VUCA obviously impacts the way we lead. And on a business perspective, other than impacting the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we react, VUCA diminishes our ability to be creative, like I said. It reduces our team's motivation. There is sub-VUCAs that might happen for you within your hotel, within your teams, within the region that you're working in. So you could have a leader or a department who's suffering more from it, and that creates the difference in change in that department versus the rest of the hotel or the rest of the team. Increases costs and has an adverse impact on the values and the culture of your company over a period of time. Now, there's another question on the poll I want you to share and take a moment to sort of share your perspective. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you feel today that you are? How prepared are you for the VUCA world? You've obviously got a sense of what happened in the pre-COVID world and sort of the last 4 or 5 months and how you have evolved as a leader and as a person, and you've seen your company evolve. But today, how do you feel how prepared you are? And I want to move forward to how do we sort of address being in this VUCA world? What are the leadership strategies and the tactics that we should be deploying in the approach with which we work in the VUCA world? So, strategic leaders will never waste a good crisis. This was shared with me by someone in the leadership team at the Andaz in my LC committee. And he shared this one. I said, that sounds nice, and I like that. A strategic leader will never waste the good crisis. He will train for it, he will prepare for it, and he will then perform and outperform the competition. It's important to remember that you can always learn. There's no such barrier of age, there's no such limitation that practice doesn't overcome. As long as you know that you're practicing and you're dedicated to it, you can change and you can adapt. So let's begin by redefining VUCA. Volatility on one hand and vision with values on the other. You have uncertainty in the old school VUCA, but you compensate for that by having a deeper level of understanding. You have complexities, and you can compensate for that complexity by a deeper care for people. And the high sense of ambiguity that you deal with is compensated by adapting so you can achieve, but adapting to achieve. So what I'm asking to do is revisit the acronym altogether and replace volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity with values, understanding, care, and the ability to adapt. And leaders and companies that are able to do this successfully, I believe are going to be able to sustain, survive, and ultimately be more profitable than any of the other companies that don't. And this is evident to us today more than ever before. I want to speak about each of these 4 points just briefly. So building a vision with your values, right? And there's different companies have different values, different individuals have different values. And I want you to take a moment, if you have a pen or paper or on your phone or in the chat box here on the right, if you could, if you share with us, what are the values that define you? And I'll come and I'm going to share my values with you momentarily on the next slide. But if you take a moment to say, okay, are you someone who's dedicated on a high level of honesty or truth or justice? Are you someone for who value is freedom, being humble, being modest, Are you someone or as a company, are you committed towards diversity and inclusion, being kind? What are the values that define you as a leader? Do you have an understanding of those values? Do you have you been able to write down 6 values that define you? If you haven't, I invite you to think about it. It's not always easy to do, but once you do it and you put into perspective that these values define you, that's a real big step forward. I will share with you mine. My values are very similar to and the same as to what we have at Hyatt and at Andaz: respect, integrity, empathy, humility, creativity, and fun. And all the leaders in Hyatt across the world would relate and resonate with this, because this becomes part of our DNA. This becomes part of our life. I want to talk briefly about each of these values, and you want to be able to please understand the importance of having your values close to your heart and understanding them. And it ties into the next three steps that we talk about in the coming few minutes. Respect is obviously about being inclusive, and the people and the environment and the diversity that you create. Integrity is about accepting the truth, honoring your commitments, taking ownership, always acting with pride. Empathy is about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Humility is letting your actions speak for yourself. Being creative is my favorite, to be innovative. And then fun, not hesitating to laugh out loud, not always taking yourself seriously. It's challenging to live all of these values always, all the time. But the closer they are to you, and the more you imbibe them, the more you practice them, the more you think about them, the more you focus on them, the more integral they become to you, and the more they become you and you become them, and you lead with these values. And these values become the foundation of your ability to deal with the VUCA world. The second, understanding and creating a world of understanding. So a higher level of understanding is intended to allow you to have obviously deeper relationships with the people you work with your communities, with your vendors, with your suppliers, and beyond the realms of a traditional commercial capitalist mindset. And this can only happen in an inclusive, unbiased, and diverse environment. You cannot have a unilateral sort of perspective or a group of people in your company or in your team or in your hotel who represent only one vision or one sense of being. So you need to have a wider sense of understanding on what's happening in the environment, in the community, in your hotel, and diversity and inclusion become an integral part of that. Something which is obviously key to me. So when you have strong values and you have a really good focus on understanding the people you're working with, the third step is care. And care always begins with empathy. Again, part of the Hyatt system and the Andaz family here. And you will, so the teams there will really relate to this. This is something they breathe day in, day out. And if you look at this picture, I want you to take a moment to think about what would you see this person is feeling. Because I want to explain a basic principle of empathy to you. And that is that you can do empathy in 3 ways. You can do empathy by observing. So let's say you look at this photograph and you say, how is she feeling? You form an opinion on that. You look at a guest walking through the lobby, sitting in the restaurant, coming to you at the front desk, arriving to you at the hotel at a certain hour a day, just purely by observing that person, you are able to understand them a little bit better. The second way for you to show empathy is by engaging with them. You can ask the person, how are you? What's happening? You can schedule it, or you could intercept and have an immediate conversation right there. You can say, sir, how are you feeling? How may I help you? What is happening? What happened? And try and understand them a little bit better. And the third way for you to do empathy and to show empathy is by immersing yourself and living what they are going through. You know, if they complain about the room, they complain about the food, there's some feedback that they're sharing with you on a specific example of hospitality, for instance. You go and dine there, you go and try it. You would want to go and see for yourself firsthand what is it that he is talking about. And then by observing, engaging, and immersing yourself into the, what that person is experiencing allows you to have a really good and high level of empathy. And this is the bedrock of being able to be caring. Empathy followed by the action you take on this is care. And care comes from a place of empathy and authentic human connection. Nothing is more important to a leader than to be his or her authentic self. You have to learn to be yourself. And for you to be yourself is the most critical thing as you deal with the challenges of the modern world. So you have values which define you, which you resonate, which are part of you, your family, your life, your business. You develop an understanding of the world that you are catering to, and you immerse yourself with that. And you focus on being caring with a human-centric approach. These three allow you to then have the platform to adapt. And adapting is the final stage of the journey in the new VUCA that I'm sharing with you. Adapting is on the bedrock of sustainable innovation. Sustainable innovation is not easy. Creativity in times of the old school VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complex, ambiguous situations is not easy. Those situations kill creativity, and leaders who fail in those situations will proceed to further kill creativity and ability of their team to find solutions. So you want to be able to adapt to achieve results. So to adapt to achieve results, you need to have a model for sustainable innovation. Sustainable innovation is not easy. You can be creative for a day or a moment. You can be creative for a certain period of time. But to create a culture of creativity and innovation, you need to have a process and a methodology. And that is called design thinking, something that I love and I've really enjoyed in the last 10, 11 years that I've been working with Hyatt. And it's become part and parcel of my day-to-day life. And there are team members in my life who would raise their eyebrows because they've heard it so often. But I invite you to search, invest, and look at design thinking and how you can understand this, because this is a separate subject in itself. Stanford University in California provides the best design school in the world. But IIM Kochi and almost every other leading institute in India also provides courses in information and design thinking. So if you can, I recommend strongly that you study this subject a little bit more for the purpose of sustainable innovation, for the purpose of adapting to achieve results, building on the new VUCA. Build your vision with your values. Create your world of understanding. Care for your people and adapt to achieve results. So that generates a higher level of oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphin in your blood. And in the new world, in the new VUCA, you're able to lead. With that, I come to the end of this quick 20 minutes. Thank you, VUCA, for making us better leaders. And I invite you to please share your feedback with me. There's my email ID. If you can share something about the presentation that you wish or that you like, I'll be the happiest to have that here from you. Thank you very much for your time today. Wishing you all the best, a great weekend ahead. And hopefully next time we will be able to meet in person. Thank you.